Welcome back, Blackhawks fans. This is our inaugural episode of Splinters, our new special that will have specific and special episodes throughout the season. For this inaugural episode, we will be reviewing the Chicago Blackhawks 2021-22 offseason. And let's just get underway. I am very, very happy to be back with you all here. Some house cleaning stuff before we get into the actual episode. Nick DeMario, our original duo that was podcasting when we began the show, is now coming back home, and he will be joining me for our in-game reviews as well as Splinters episodes. There may be some days where he is not on the show. He is just found out recently he is going to be a new father. So congratulations to Nick. He will be having twins. So wish him all the luck in the world with that. I'd also like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Chai Sports Fan Joe for all of his contributions last year. We have decided to amicably part ways. As far as I'm aware at this stage in time, Joe will not be on the show. He is always welcome to come back and join us anytime he wishes. I very much appreciated all of his contributions to the show last year. I think we had a pretty successful first year doing this show in its new iteration. So again, thank you to Chai Sports Fan Joe for all of your contributions last season. And with that, now that all that nonsense is away, let's get into the review of the offseason, shall we? And I will add a note. I will also be reviewing the preseason. One of the things I want to talk about on this show for this episode is the beat writers and the how to put this, sensationalism that they are putting out into the ether that many of you fall for. So after we get through the off season and we get to the preseason section of the show, I will start to kind of talk about that. So before we get into the off season, there is an important move that I want to review with you all that was actually made during the season last year, which is when the Blackhawks acquired Henrik Borgstrom and Riley Stillman and forward Brett Connolly from the Florida Panthers for Lucas Carlson and Lucas Wallmark. I believe there may have also been some picks involved. I can't recall off the top of my head, but those were the players that were involved in the trade that was made during last season. And that's the reason I'm bringing that up, is because Henrik Borgstrom really was the centerpiece of the trade. Obviously, we got to see Riley Stillman last year, but Henrik Borgstrom, who is going to be an important piece going forward, was brought in last season, and we have now seen him in the preseason. And at the time that I am recording this, we will be seeing him later tonight make his Chicago Blackhawks debut against Colorado. But with that, I wanted to touch on that because he's an important story that I want to touch on as I enter into the preseason. So now that we have covered that, let's talk about the actual offseason. So the actual offseason got underway on June 8th. That is when the Chicago Blackhawks signed their first round pick from 2019, Lucas Reichel. Signed him to his 3-year entry-level contract. And then about a week later, on June 14th, they signed Jakub Pour. He was from the Czech Republic. I believe he was a former teammate of Dominik Kubalik, and he was signed to a two-year, two-way entry-level contract. On Sunday, July 11th, the big precursor to the big trade that happened this offseason. Duncan Keith was traded to the Edmonton Oilers for Caleb Jones and a 2022 third-round pick. Tim Soderlund was also included in that trade along with Duncan Keith. But the main piece there, going back to Edmonton, obviously Duncan Keith. Shortly after that, about 10 days, on July 22nd, the big trade happened. The Blackhawks acquired Caleb Jones's brother, much more notable defenseman, Seth Jones, for a 2021 pick, 11th overall in this past year's draft, along with their first round pick in this upcoming draft in 2022, as well as Adam Boquist. The Hawks got the 31st overall pick, which was the Tampa Bay Lightning's pick. They got that from Columbus and the swap of first round picks this year. Let's talk about this trade because it was quickly followed up by Seth Jones signing an extension, a 8-year extension at $9.5 million. I'll say this, and I want to include the Caleb Jones trade in this as well because they go together. So with Caleb Jones and Seth Jones, I actually like the Caleb Jones deal. The Blackhawks saved money on that deal, and they got a third-round pick out of that. I think that's a pretty good deal for aging Duncan Keith. I would have been fine keeping Duncan Keith along for the ride here in Chicago, simply because I think he still has value in teaching younger players, especially when you're Chicago and you have so many young defensive prospects. But I will put a caveat there. That would only be right if I couldn't, like, I guess my point there is I'm not going to be forced to trade Duncan Keith. Will I trade him? Yes, but not unless I'm getting some sort of valuable return back, because he does have value. And obviously Edmonton saw that. They traded Caleb Jones in their third-round pick to Chicago, to many fans' dismay in Edmonton. But I think that's a fair trade. I really do. I think that's a fair trade. Now, on the Seth Jones aspect of this two trade kind of sister trades, if you will, bad trade and horrible contract. If this would have been Adam Boquist and a swapping of the first round picks this year, I would have been okay with it. It's the fact that they included the 2022 or the 2022 first round pick, this season's first round pick, into the trade. This year's draft class is arguably, and including to many, many people, including myself, the most deep draft class in the past 2 decades. The Blackhawks most certainly, unless you have to be fairly certain, in my opinion, when you make this trade, that you are going to be in a top 10 team in the league, that your pick is going to be somewhere between 22 and 32nd overall to make this trade. And even there, I would say you would want to be probably actually top 7. You would want to be you would want that pick to be 25th to 32nd. Then maybe it's not so bad, but the first, I would say pretty comfortably, the first 20 picks in this draft are probably going to be pretty close to NHL players, most of them. So you gave up a lot for Seth Jones, and then it's compounded and worse because you traded Boquist with it. Again, I'm not a fan of Boquist, but then you gave up $9.5 million of cap space. And this is a guy who many people, like, I would say the consensus on Seth Jones, it's about 50-50. 50% of people think he's an all-star number one defenseman, and the other half think he's terrible, that he's maybe a top four or a really good, third pair that can work on the power play. So in my view, this was the worst decision of the offseason prior to a move that we will talk about that was literally just made days ago. But really bad move. Bad trade followed up by an even worse contract. That contract, I have a very good feeling, will become one of, if not the worst contract in the NHL very soon. We followed that up by extending Adam Gaudette on the 25th of July for a one-year contract extension. I'm all for this move. I have no problem with Adam Gaudette. I thought he's a nice depth player. He played a handful of games last year, did pretty well. Didn't work out with the Canucks, but, I thought it's a low-risk signing. The more the merrier. And then we come to another one of the best moves, probably the best move of the offseason by any team in the league. The Blackhawks acquired Marc-Andre Fleury for literally nothing. Not figuratively nothing. Or I guess I should, I'm getting ahead of myself. Swap that. They literally gave up Michael Hakkarainen, and figuratively, they didn't give him up because I believe he was retraded, or after he was traded to Vegas, he was either released or reassigned to Rockford. So he is back in the Hawks organization, even though he's not Blackhawks property, or at least like I said, he may have been released. I don't even recall. But the Blackhawks got Marc-Andre Fleury for basically nothing. Now, I'm going to sit here and toot our own horn because on day one, yes, Barstool Chief, you dumb shit. You are one of the dumbest people in the Chicago Blackhawks blogger sphere. You are. And I'm going to sit here and tell you right now, not you, we, because we said it on day one, the day the trade was made. And you can ask anybody that followed us that he was going to report. And how did I know this? Well, I have many people. I know many people, scouts, all throughout hockey. I've been a former player. I know scouts and I know players, some of which are still in the NHL. And I knew he was going to report. And another thing, a lot of people were talking about him retiring. That was one of the big things. Well, you don't even need to have inside sources like me to know this stuff. He literally, and it was reported on in Vegas, was talking about re-signing a new extension last October. This is not some new thing, like that he is just all of a sudden, wasn't going to keep playing. And look, everyone wants to talk about, well, he didn't want to move his family and do all this stuff. Let me just explain this to you. Marc-Andre Fleury is about, I believe, 60-ish wins away from passing Patrick Waugh for second all-time. Now, for all my Corey Crawford jock humpers out there that are constantly on your knees for Crawford, do you want to see an actual number one goaltender that's a Hall of Famer? It's Flower. It's Marc-Andre Fleury. Again, as I just said, Marc-Andre Fleury has been to 5 Stanley Cup final appearances. He's made 5 Stanley Cup final appearances. He made 4 with Pittsburgh, 3 of which he won, and then he made 1 with Vegas. A lot of you probably don't even remember the 2008 appearance where they lost to the Red Wings. It's been so long ago. They went back. We had the rematch, kind of the Rocky II of the NHL between Pittsburgh and Detroit the year later. And obviously, Marian Hossa was involved in both of those on the losing side both times. So some trivia there. But 5 Stanley Cup final appearances, 4 with Pittsburgh, 1 with Las Vegas. The one with Las Vegas was or I guess I should say the first season, the inaugural season of Las Vegas. He was the star of that team, without question, that took them to the final against Washington. On top of that, he has been in the Western Conference final with Vegas the last 2 years. He's been to probably the year before he went to Vegas, he was in the conference final. So he was in the conference. He was in his 4 years with Vegas. He was in the conference final 4 times, or 3 out of 4 times. In Pittsburgh, his last 3 seasons with Pittsburgh, he was in the conference final. And then he was obviously in the conference final at least twice over for those two, the 2008 and 2009. So we're talking about a guy that's been to almost, if not pretty damn, I can't remember in between how many conference finals they went to between their cup runs in Pittsburgh. I think there may be one in there, but basically he's been to between 8 to 10 conference final appearances and 5 Stanley Cup appearances with 3 championships. And now he's got the Vezina trophy on his mantle, as he just won that this season, or for this past off season, or past season. Jesus, I'm so excited. I'm getting all my stuff mixed up here. And then, like I said at the very beginning on my long review of his career here, he's about 60 wins away from passing Patrick Waugh for second all time in wins. All time. After he does that, assuming he does, the only person that would be ahead of him is Martin Brodeur. Ever. And I can't tell you how many times I had to sit and argue with Blackhawks fans on who was better, Corey Crawford or Marc-Andre Fleury. It's Marc-Andre Fleury, and it's not close, folks. It's not. It's not. Not even remotely. Plus, Fleury did all of that and had all of that success in Pittsburgh with a defense that was no question not as good as the one that Crawford had in front of him in Chicago during the heyday. No question. I suspect he will keep playing after this season. So, as someone who also told all of you last year, Kevin Lankinen was going to be the starter. In my opinion, what the Hawks should do here is give Fleury a 2-year contract extension and Lankinen a 2-year contract extension. Both goalies are up at the end of the season. Fleury, bring him in to, he's the starter this year. Next year, I would have Fleury and Lankinen split. And then you give him one last season, 2 years from now, to chase Patrick Waugh and to kind of hand over the reins to Kevin Lankinen as the new number 1, definitive number 1. And Lankinen might not wait that long, folks. Lankinen is good. So we will see, but that is what I would do. I would give both of them a 2-year contract extension. Let's do this for two more years after this. We'll take Flower to retirement. We'll give him the opportunity to win another ring, maybe multiple rings. We'll let him chase Patrick Waugh's record. and then we'll send him off to the sunset, and then we'll give Lankinen a long-term number one goalie salary and contract extension in 2 years. That's what I would do. I think that makes the most sense. I would venture a guess that's what Stan Bowman is planning to do. I don't think you bring Marc-Andre Fleury in for one season. Again, and I know he was talking about signing a contract extension last year in Vegas. So with that, let's move on to the next trade. Another good trade, a trade that I really liked. Tyler Johnson was acquired on the 26th of July for the rights to Brent Seabrook. I believe there was also maybe a draft pick included here that went to Chicago. So the Blackhawks were not going to be able to get rid of Brent Seabrook. They just weren't, without buying him out, which would have been catastrophic. To get Tyler Johnson, who makes less money than Seabrook, so you're saving $1 million on your cap, and you're getting, like I said, I'm pretty sure they got a draft pick with this move. You're getting a draft pick. It's an absolute steal of a move. It helps. This is another rare trade that works out for both teams. Tampa couldn't afford Johnson. They moved him. And I mean, we're talking, Johnson's a guy that can put up 50 to 60 points. This isn't a guy that we're paying a lot of money to that can't produce. I'm very excited to see what he can do. Now, his numbers did drop off the past few seasons in Tampa, but you're talking about Tampa Bay Lightning that literally had a murderer's row of a lineup that was $10 million over the cap with all of their cap gymnastics. This is a good player. Older, sure, but I still think he can contribute 50 to 60 points in a season. Again, great move. You got something for nothing. You got a contributing piece. And like I said, I'm pretty certain they got a draft pick as well. It's not showing here on my list, but I'm pretty sure there was a draft pick involved there. After that move, they signed on the 27th of July Kara from the Edmonton Oilers. Nice depth forward, big physical two-way forward to solidify the bottom six. They wanted to add toughness, grit, size. They do all of that with that signing. Again, I have no problem there. Same day, they signed Jake McCabe to a 4-year contract extension, or not extension, contract. And again, good signing here. Continues to solidify the defense. Great defensive numbers for Jake McCabe before he had his surgery and was injured last season. Another great move. I think the defense now, even with Seth Jones, who, like I said, I'm not high on, and I think he has a bad contract. The defense is much improved, and it is brimming with depth. You have Kalynuk, who, in my opinion, is the best of the prospects that are currently signed. You've got Beaudin, you've got Mitchell, you've got Regula, Galvis, who they're very high on, especially after this preseason, which we will get to. Caleb Jones, right's brought in. He had a very good preseason, and we'll get to him. But the defensive depth is very nice. And even at forward, which we're going to get to. Brandon Hagel was given a 3-year contract extension on August 5th. Obviously, I don't think anybody, I mean, what can you say about Brandon Hagel? Great move there. Mike Hardman was given a 2-year contract extension. I thought he played very well in the bottom 6 last year. Another big two-way guy that can get you some points. On the 15th of August, Alex Nylander was given a 1-year contract extension. I'm a pretty big proponent of keeping Nylander and seeing what he can do, especially given the fact that he's pretty much been injured ever since we had him. And the talent is there. He just needs to be given the opportunity and be healthy. On the 17th, Mackenzie Entwistle was given a 2-year contract extension. Again, depth forward. We'll see what he does. Big contract extension was given on the 30th of August, with Connor Murphy getting a 4-year extension for about, I believe, $4.5 million. He's getting about $1 million more a year. Excellent signing by Bowman. Great cap hit. Great player. Excellent decision there by Bowman. Now let's move into September. On the 15th of December, Nolan Allen, who was the 31st overall pick this year, signed a 3-year entry-level contract. I don't think anything positive of that player, so I'm just going to move on. Let's see here. Up to the 30th of September, Colton Dock, who was drafted in the second round this year by the Blackhawks, the brother of Kirby Dock, signed his 3-year entry-level contract. I thought he looked okay in the preseason. Be interesting to see where he fits in, if he fits in. It would have been a shock if they didn't sign him right after having his brother and then drafting him. So unexpected, but that's out of the way now. Let's move up to October 4th. Brett Connolly was put on waivers. We are now officially in the preseason. Moves are starting to be made. This was a good move, in my opinion. The only reason why you acquired Connolly was to get your hands on Borgstrom and Stillman. Connolly is not worth sitting in the stands or taking a roster spot over a younger player. So I'm surprised they had the balls to do that, but good on them. Okay, now we are in the preseason. So let's talk about players that I thought really shined. I think Brandon Hagel is kept up right where he left off. Same with Alex DeBrincat. Both of those are great developments. Jonathan Taves is back. That's a huge boost to this team. Huge boost. And he looks good. He looks like his old self, so that's good. I thought Caleb Jones was a huge standout in the preseason this year, especially that third pair of Jones and Kalynuk. I'm going to be straight with you. The Blackhawks did not lose anybody of significance to Seattle in the expansion draft. Unfortunately, Calvin DeHaan was not taken. So, that is what it is. But I'm going to tell you right now, after watching that Caleb Jones and Kalynuk third pair in preseason, if it were up to me, that would be my third pair, and Calvin DeHaan would be sitting in the stands. Murphy, Seth Jones, McCabe, and who am I forgetting here? I'm forgetting somebody, but that would be my third pair. Stillman, I guess. Who else? I thought Kirby Dock was kind of just there in the preseason. I didn't see much from him. He had maybe a good game or so. But overall, I thought he could have been better. Dmitry Osipov, who was a defenseman that they converted to a forward, I thought was very interesting. He's a big body. very good skater. Something they've been looking for since they traded for Victor Ejdshow in the Ryan Hartman trade a few years ago. I really thought he played well. I would expect him to maybe get a shot coming up. I thought Henrik Borgstrom played really well. I'm excited to see what he does over a full season. And, I got to tell you, I thought Dylan Strome had a very, it may not have shown up in stats, but I thought he had a really good preseason. And it looks like they're talking about trading him now, and he's going to be scratched for the first game of the year, it looks like. And boy, I don't know. I thought he played really well in the preseason. So we'll see. But I'm very concerned with the management of this team, both behind the bench and in the front office. I think, and I'm not talking about all the nonsensical stuff, the bullshit that was non-hockey stuff that was sensationalized all off season by the media. And once that nightmare that has turned into is resolved, and I expect it to be resolved pretty quickly, very soon here, I will comment on it. I'm not going to comment on it other than I think it's been a witch hunt from the start. I think if you follow my Twitter or our Twitter account that I tweet from, you can probably gather that from what I've said on the issue. But I'm talking about cleaning house just for hockey ops, between coaching, between contracts that have been given out, between trades that have been made, etc. I'm very dubious on the people running this team, even if they did make some good moves this offseason. Aside from that, Alex Nylander. Now, I have defended Alex Nylander ad nauseum for a long time. I'm not going to get into why I think he deserves a shot, because I just don't want to get into that. We've already covered that enough, and it's not pertinent to what I want to discuss. What I want to discuss with regards to Alex Nylander is he is kind of a catalyst to just how sensationalized and how horrible the Blackhawks beat is. If what I just was alluding to earlier, the non-hockey related story that was pushed all off season, if that wasn't enough to kind of give you a hint as to where the ethics and journalistic integrity of the Chicago beat reporters lie, let's look at Nylander. And I want to specifically focus on Ben Pope. I don't know Ben Pope's background. I don't really care. I don't care about any, to be honest, I don't care about any of these people's background. I just care that they tell the truth, that they do their research, and they report the facts to you, the people. That's the point of being a journalist. But these people are not journalists. They're wannabe, pretend journalists. Half of them have been masquerading on Twitter for the last 4 months as lawyers, and they're not. Because half of the, literally over, not even half, over half of the shit they've said is just blatantly wrong. And they don't know what they're talking about. And I say this as someone who actually went to law school and graduated. Okay? Now that we've cleared that up, that they've been masquerading as lawyers all off season, they also can't even get simple stuff right. I asked him from my personal account, okay? Not the Twitter, not writing the pine, but my personal Twitter account, because I love hockey. I like looking at contracts. I like the business side of it. And I like thinking about the expansion draft. So it's kind of trying to, come up even for this show, right? Because you got to come up with stuff, what you want to talk about, where you think this player is going to still be here in a year, blah, 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 blah. You get it, right? So I was looking at Cat Friendly and I seen Nylander. And I was looking at the rules to the expansion draft that were the same rules from when Vegas came in. And I tweeted at Ben Pope and I said, Alex Nylander is not eligible to be picked, right? Because it says 3 seasons. Like you have to have played 3 seasons to be eligible for the draft. All players that are either draft picks and not signed, or that have played a maximum of 2 years pro, are ineligible for the expansion draft. Alex Nylander had played only 2 full seasons, and then he had played less than 10 games, I believe, before he was sent back to his junior team in Buffalo. And obviously he missed all of last season. So that shouldn't count, right? Because he hasn't played. And I'm like, well, so he should be exempt. Like my main question wasn't even over last year, whether last year counts, because he didn't play. My question was his first season where he played less than 10 games, which normally, because that under like contract rules, that doesn't count towards a player's first year. If they play more than 10 games, then the first year their entry-level contract kicks in and the clock begins ticking. But Nylander didn't play 10 games. So that's where I was exploring. And I'm pretty sure I included Cat Friendly in on the discussion, to which they didn't respond. And Ben Pope had given some response to, was like vague, because he didn't know, right? Like, and he didn't want to put himself out there. And then finally he came up and he goes, no, Alex Nylander is not exempt. He will have to be protected. To the point that he started yelling in Twitter form and how did he put it? Like scolding. He began scolding me and other fans on his Twitter account that were asking him this question as to whether Alex Nylander was exempt from the expansion draft. And his position that he doubled down on, to the point that he literally told me, he snapped and said, something along the lines of, I'm tired of you asking me this question. I've answered it and answered it and answered it. Alex Nylander is not exempt from the expansion draft. Okay, kids. I don't know what the fuck your problem is, Ben, but let's fast forward a couple months. Guess what? Alex Nylander is exempt. And good old McBrooklyn over here was correct. And you were wrong. And you just made an ass of yourself all over Twitter. So there's that. Now let's talk about the preseason. Again, involving Alex Nylander. Alex Nylander now is going to be put on waivers, and he's going to get claimed. Like I'm getting so excited here. My mouth is getting sore. Let's talk. Let's think about this, folks. Okay. Everyone and their mother online says Alex Nylander is terrible. He sucks. Put him on waivers. He's not waivers exempt. Put him on waivers. He's no good. So what do the beat writers do? First of all, putting Nylander, because it's Alex Nylander, they've created this controversy. Ever since Alex Nylander was traded for Henry Jokiharju, there's been this controversy that's been surrounding him. And that's that. If we're going to get down to the nitty gritty as to why the true reason why Blackhawks fans do not like Alex Nylander, it's not because Alex Nylander has played horribly. It's because he was traded for an overrated defenseman that the Blackhawks drafted, who can barely crack the top 4 defenders in Buffalo. And that's after they gutted their roster, where they traded Ristolainen, where they let Jake McCabe go, or Jake McCabe was injured and then they let him go, and now he's here in Chicago. Like, he could barely make the roster there. This is not, the Blackhawks did not lose that trade. I know everyone wants to say they lost. They did not lose that trade. And ever since that trade happened, we've been building this narrative and this controversy surrounding Nylander, right? So already you have that. You already had all the shit that we just went over with the expansion draft, because the fans just want to get rid of him. They want to get rid of him. They want to get rid of him. Now he can be put on waivers. Seattle can't take him, but he can be put on waivers. So we're going to put him on waivers, and he's going to be taken. Now, I want you all to think about this. Before we even get into the waivers thing, the fuck up that the media did, including Ben Pope, who's the subject of this. Before we even get to that, everybody says Nylander sucks. Get rid of him. And then in the same breath, whether it was the expansion draft or now on waivers, oh, he's going to be picked up. That's why we got to do it. That's why we got to expose him, because Seattle will take him. Or that's why we got to put him on the waiver wire, because Arizona or somebody else, Toronto, somebody else is going to pick him up. Toronto fans are, if you look online, are salivating at the opportunity to get their hands on Alex Nylander for nothing. Does that say anything, folks? Like, you're saying he's worthless, but then you're saying all these other teams are going to pick him up. That says either two things. Either you just have a vendetta against him and want him gone, which is the truth, or you think you know something the rest of the league doesn't. So either you're so arrogant that you think nobody else sees that he's no good. This, of course, after you've berated him the last 2 years and saying he's no good, or you think the other. Unbelievable. Just that alone. You either have a vendetta against him, which again is really the truth for most people, or you just think you're smarter than the rest of the league. It's one or the other. Now that we've covered that and the irony of that, let's go back to Ben Pope. Ben Pope did the exact same thing. I didn't even bother asking him this time, and I didn't even bother checking, to be honest with you, whether or not Nylander was exempt. Not like I did with the expansion draft. Because in my mind, there's no, like, Stan Bowman, as little faith in a GM as I have in him, I don't think he's dumb enough to just put Nylander on waivers. Okay. So, like, to me, there's no point in even looking into it. But I've seen people asking Pope about this. And he did the same thing he did to me about the expansion exemption, where he started scolding people and getting angry because they were asking whether he could do a conditioning stint and all these other things that people were trying to come up with. People that are not nuts, that actually realize how idiotic it would be to lose Nylander for nothing. And after we've done all of that, right, we went through the same bullshit that we did 4 or 5 months ago. Guess who's wrong again? Ben Pope. Alex Nylander is indeed exempt from waivers and can go down to Rockford. The irony that we're not only wrong twice, but we're wrong twice in regards to the same player with technicalities to his contract is humoring, especially considering it's the player that everybody hates for stupid reasons. Now, the reason I'm telling you this and bringing it up is because, again, the unethicalness and the lack of journalistic integrity of the journalists in Chicago. Nobody picked up on that. Nobody picked up on him being exempt from the expansion draft. Nobody. And look, let me clarify this. I'm not saying Ben Pope, Scott Powers, Mark Lazarus, or John Dietz, who has given Dietz syndrome to all of these, well, everyone except Lazarus, who's his own amalgamation of nuttiness. All of these reporters don't have to know or understand the contract workings of Alex Nylander. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying instead of going out to all of you and going, this is the facts, this is the way it is, without doing your journalistic integrity and journalistic due process of actually making sure that what you're saying is correct, well, do you see where I'm going with this? We're talking about journalistic malfeasance. And I don't even want to call it journalistic because these people are not journalists. They're pretend journalists. These people are really, well, maybe Powers. But in reality, Mark Lazarus is literally just a social justice activist masquerading as a journalist, which is what a lot of these people are, including the dumb schmuck that wrote the book about racism in hockey, who is now, he's so horrible at his job. Now he's infiltrated the Chicago school district. Evan Moore. What a piece of work that guy is. Obviously, I guess he was smart enough to know he wasn't good enough to cut it as a journalist. So he got out and went to the public school system, the biggest joke in Illinois. But I guess my point on this is the reason that we started this show originally in its original form 3 years ago, when I'm not even going to get into this, but the people that stole our logo and kind of ripped off our name, you know who you are. But that iteration was started as the Uncensored Chicago Blackhawks podcast. I don't say that anymore because I don't know. I don't like, at this point, you ought to know if you've been listening long enough, and thank you again for listening, that what's pretty unfiltered here. And but that's why this was started. The lack of journalistic integrity to what is going on in the beat. And I will say this. And this includes the people that stole our old logo or knocked off our old logo and our name. They knocked off both the name of our podcast and our logo, which is quite saying something considering our logo was a knockoff of the Blackhawks logo. And then eventually we just started this, which is a unique name and completely a logo that's completely non-distinct from the Blackhawks. But even that group, the bloggers and the kids and the fans, they know more and have more passion and are better than these beat writers combined. Like if I were you, that I would give more credence to those people than I would to the beat writers. The only thing the beat writers are there for at this point is lineups and scratches and injury reports. Other than that, like if you're looking for actual like stories and actual analysis, it don't, because you're not going to get it. That's like Lazarus and Powers. Powers actually used to be good until he teamed up with Lazarus, and then the Lazarus syndrome just snuck into everything they wrote, and they've become this woke ideologue bullshit narrative that they push out. But not aside from that, they've tried to make themselves sound smarter. So they've started incorporating all this hockey jargon into all of their pieces. And that's fine. Like, if you know it, but it's so obvious they're doing it just to sound smarter than they are. Like, they don't really know what they're talking about. So they incorporate these lingos from the games and the coaches that they pick up among the coaches and the players. And it's hilarious because it's so disingenuous. Do you know, I would kill to have, I don't even like, everybody knows I'm quite political and I vocalize my political opinions. I don't care if you're the farthest left progressive on the planet. If you are genuine and you do good research and you do good journalism, I will give you all the credit you deserve. But if your entire shtick is just to push nonsense out to your public and to create sensational stories and sensational headlines that you yourself have not taken 10 fucking minutes to go and source properly and to validate, just so you can get clicks and subscriptions to your dying newspaper and periodicals, like, no, you don't have my respect. I'm sorry. Be a genuine person and do the work and put in good work, and you'll get the respect that you want. Like, again, as I said, my whole point of this, with regards to Nylander, not even his play, just his contract, whether he's available to be put on waivers, exempt on waivers, or exempt in the expansion draft, you can get clarification on that if you put in the fucking work. But they didn't do that. You know why? Because they just went to Cap Friendly, which is an online website, and they go, Cap Friendly says they're exempt or they're not exempt. I guess that means they're not exempt. That's what we're going to roll with, as if you and I and everybody else on the internet doesn't already have access to this. The point of a journalist is to be able to go out and tell the public something it doesn't know. Anyway, I'm done with my rant on the beat. I've got it out of my system. Thank you for listening to my rant on the beat. Thank you for listening to the rundown of the offseason. I want to talk, before we wrap this up, I want to talk a little bit about where I expect the Blackhawks to finish this season. A lot of people have been asking this. Do we expect them to? Oh, well, I got ahead of myself, actually. I got ahead of myself. I forgot, and maybe I'm intentionally trying to forget. The Blackhawks went and signed Eric Gustafson. That was the final offseason move / preseason move. And my God, was it a terrible decision. Thankfully, it looks like he's scratched tonight. But as Sherrod, another friend of the show, said, generally, it's not a good idea to sign a defenseman that can't skate backwards. And I understand the allure to a guy that once put up 60 points for you. But I got to tell you, man, I already said I would have Jones and Kalanick as my third pair once they're both healthy, which looks to be in about 2.5 to 3 weeks. And you've also got Ian Mitchell. You've got Nicholas Beaudin. You've got Alec Regula and all Isaac Phillips, Jakob Galvas. You've got all these young defensive prospects. And yet we're going to bring in Eric Gustafson. Now, I imagine part of the reason there is they figure they can put him on the second power play unit that Kalanick was going to fill. And that's fine. I just, again, Wyatt Kalanick is probably the best skater of all the defensemen. And now we've replaced him in the lineup, or we will be replacing him in the lineup with, as Sherrod said so eloquently, a guy that can't skate backwards. Yeah. What a disaster. All I say is this. I hope Gustafson does not take away a place from a young player for the majority of this season. That's my hope. We'll see what happens. But back to the story of where I see this team finishing in the standings. So we're back to the old standings, or the old division format that we've grown accustomed to in non-COVID times, with the exception that Arizona has now been added to the Central Division thanks to the arrival of the Seattle Kraken, who are now out in the Pacific. So to do a little bit of a wind up here, our division now encompasses the Arizona Coyotes, the Colorado Avalanche, who we will be playing later tonight, the Dallas Stars, the Minnesota Wild, the Nashville Predators, the St. Louis Blues, and the Winnipeg Jets. Now, I think everyone and their mother knows the Blackhawks are better than the Coyotes. Despite last season's record, I think when you look at the direction and the sell-off that happened in Nashville versus the building up, which has happened here in Chicago, I think it's fair to say that the Blackhawks are better than Nashville. Winnipeg got swept by Montreal in the semifinals last year in playoffs. I don't think too highly of the Jets, to be honest with you. I think they were in a very weak division last year. And I think once they play stiffer competition, you will see that more clearly. Dallas, I do not think it's a very good team. I think they're old, and I think they're on their decline. Which brings me to the two teams that I'm most interested in, that most Hawks fans are probably interested in, which is Minnesota and St. Louis. Now, I think most people will tell you Colorado should win this division pretty handily. We'll see. But they are, as of now, as we start the season, the clear and away favorites. Although I am going to pick the Hawks to win tonight. I have a good feeling about tonight for whatever reason. And not just because Nathan McKinnon is out with COVID, but I think we can all agree Colorado should finish first in the division. The question is, who's going to finish in the other two automatic playoff spots, in the second and third spot? And that's where I think the Hawks, the Blues, and the Wild are going to be the three teams to watch in this division. All three teams will make the playoffs because I expect the team that doesn't get the automatic playoff spot to get the wild card. In fact, it wouldn't shock me if the fifth team also gets the wild card, because the Pacific Division is just trash. But I don't know. Like, the Pacific Division is so trash that, like, I could see the Central Division hurting itself because the teams are so much better than they are in the Pacific. But I don't know. Like I said, at least four of the teams in the Central are going to the playoffs, barring some sort of horrific disaster. But I think the conversation that I'm curious to have is, are the Blackhawks a top three team in the division? That's the question I want to have in the debate. I've seen a lot of people picking the Hawks at fourth and fifth. And obviously, the Hawks are better than fifth. I'm pretty confident in that. I guess the question is, are they good enough to finish in the top three? That's the question. And I think they are. I think they're better than Minnesota. I know Minnesota played really well last year, and they had a really good run in the weak division that was out there. But I think that's why they had a really good run, because the division was weak. I think the Hawks played them pretty tight, the two games that I saw them play. And same thing with the Blues for the most part. So it's right now it's kind of hard to gauge where those two teams, including the Hawks, are going to be. But I'm going to say the Hawks are going to finish in the top three. I'm not going to say second or third, because I think those teams are going to be kind of interchangeable. But I think the Hawks are going to be up there. In fact, I'm going to say they finished third. I'm just going to go ahead and say I think the Colorado first, St. Louis second, Hawks third. But I don't think the Hawks will be far behind St. Louis. And then I think Minnesota's in fourth. And then Jets in fifth, Preds in sixth, and then the Yotes obviously carrying up the rear at eighth. I think I missed the Stars, actually. I don't know whether I'd put the Stars ahead of the Preds or not. Yeah, I'll go Colorado, St. Louis, Chicago, Minnesota, Dallas, Nashville, or no. Dallas, Winnipeg, Nashville, Arizona. So again, since I can't get it straight myself. Colorado, St. Louis, Chicago, Minnesota, who did I say? Dallas, and then Nashville, or no, Winnipeg, Nashville, Arizona. You get the idea. So with that, everybody, again, thank you for listening to me get through. It's kind of a long show as we reviewed the offseason and the preseason. I did my diatribe on how horrifically bad the beat writers have been all summer and how they've been sensationalizing everything they write for clicks and subscriptions, paid subscriptions, which to me is just sad. The fact that you would put your journalistic integrity into that, to lose it for that is just pathetic. And I know I singled out Ben Pope, but it's not just Ben, it's all of them. Lazarus, Powers, Dietz, all of them. And then to talk about where I see this team going forward. Like I said, I think they finished third in the Central. I think the last time they finished third, they won the Cup, didn't they? I think in 2015. So that wouldn't be bad. Well, no. I think they finished third in 2016 too, or something like that. But I can't remember. Either way, it's not a bad thing to finish that low. I like this team. I think it's built for the playoffs. I think they are a top 3 team. I don't think they're in a wild card spot. Maybe they are, but we'll see. That's what we're going to get to experience as we go through this 82-game season. Congratulations, by the way, to Seattle and the Seattle Kraken fans. I watched your game last night. I thought it was very unfortunate that the game ended on such a controversial call. I'm happy to see Seattle's in the league. I think it's great for the game. We also, obviously, the NHL's on ESPN again. And we've got Barry Melrose back, man. Barry Melrose. Barry Melrose. And no Gary Thorne. No Gary Thorne. But we got Barry. I don't know what they're doing over there. And my God, was the camera angles, the camera replays, and everything horrific last night. I know it's the first day of the season, but wow. Anyway, again, thank you all for listening. I hope you will be with us the rest of the season. We will have a review. Again, it will at least be me. I'm hoping Mr. DeMario will be there with me as well. I have not heard if he's going to be there tonight. It is a late game, so he may not be. But I hope you all come along for the ride in our second season here at Riding the Pine. This is obviously our inaugural episode of Splinters. Normally, someone should be with me for Splinters, as this is going to be kind of more of a special, right? So eventually this might turn into a weekly program, but for right now, as we grow and build, it's just going to be a special, or we have, one once or twice a month, something like that. And we go from there. And it's just, like we were going to start it last year with Colleton and the Jack Adams. And about the time we were getting ready to do it, the team started to suck. And Colleton obviously fell out of that discussion fairly rapidly. So we just kind of waited to do this until now. But yes, with that, everybody, thanks for listening. It's about 4:30 Central Time, and I hope I will see most of you join us on Twitter as we all get all excited about opening night tonight in Colorado between our Chicago Blackhawks and the Colorado Avalanche. Until tomorrow morning, guys, with our review of tonight's game, stay safe, have some fun tonight, and I'll talk to you all later, and we'll see you on Thursday morning. Thanks a lot, and let's go Hawks, baby!